Wait.
prioritize.
Any should. I got to write that down.
Yep. Any should is fighting with what is.
I love that.
So here, I'll do a quick tangent on that. My boss should have recognized my efforts. My coworkers should have done their fair share. My kids should have listened to me. The service here should have been better. I should have gone to the gym. Well, did those things happen or not? And so one of the things that I really encourage people to do, try to take a piece of paper, put a line down the middle, and just, if you can in the moment, and if not, thinking back on it later in the day, on one side of the paper, anytime it's a should about yourself, and anytime on the other side, it's a should about anything external. Don't do anything with it. Just record it. Then, before you go to bed at night, cross out should and rewrite it with could. My boss could have recognized my effort. My coworker could have done their fair share. My kid could have listened to me. I could have gone to the gym. And if you do that for a week or two, you'll both start to realize what are the topics or the clusters around which you have these internalized ideas of what the world's supposed to be like and where you're fighting with it the most. And you'll start to recognize it in the moment when you do it and be able to replace should with could. Because once you say could, well, did it happen or didn't it? Now I'm empowered. If it didn't happen, what do I want to do now?
Dr. Jonathan Marion is joining me today on Curveball, and I am so excited because he is here to drop a truth bomb that could totally change how you see yourself. And I just loved this. We are human beings, not human doings. I thought I'm going to make 1,000 bumper stickers out of that. I want you to think about it because Jonathan didn't learn it. He literally lived it. He had spinal nerve damage, left him questioning if he would ever walk again. And I thought it was a long time ago, but it wasn't. It was only 5 years ago. He was an cultural anthropologist, and he had a semester from hell that tested every ounce of his resilience. And all during this, he had a devastating breakup with the most significant romantic relationship. Although he's assured me, he's had many, 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 many since, right? That left him reeling. All at once, his world quite literally fell apart and left him flat on his back, quite literally. In the middle of the whole thing, he found himself asking, who am I if I can't do all the things that define me? And this question led to a life-changing realization. His worth had nothing to do with what he could accomplish. That epiphany became the being framework, which I love, which now helps others stop hustling for their work and start living with intention. That's one of my favorite words. Jonathan, welcome to Curveball.
Thank you so much for having me on. Happy to be here, Heather.
All the way from Portugal. He is a 100% nomad. So do you have do you travel with everything like in a suitcase, or do you have you're able to do, that's amazing. Do you have a place where you have stuff stored at all, or not really?
I have a little bit of stuff stored at my dad and stepmom's house, but it's like one closet and under one bed. I really had downsized from a 3-bedroom plus office house to a 1-bedroom apartment. And now it's a couple of carry-on size bags.
Oh my gosh. I give people so much props. So I hope you're enjoying Portugal. So you had the trifecta of curveballs, and that sounds super intense. So what was the moment during this whole experience that stopped you to ask, who am I if I'm not doing all these things?
Yeah. So in the first half of 2019, I was actually on a research leave in Brazil and staying in Rio de Janeiro with a friend of mine in not a tourist area at all. I was probably the only person from North America in that zone, if you will, at least living there. And I remember sitting in his living room and looking across the street and thinking, I'm staying in a small bedroom that he so generously shares with me, but it's smaller than my closet at home, but I feel more at home here. What's that about? And it really came down to quality of relationships, and that the people who knew me in Brazil loved Jonathan the person and not all the external accolades and accomplishments of the latest teaching evaluation, the latest grant, the latest publication, etc. And I was then also working with a dance instructor over in Sao Paulo when I was visiting there. And we were talking about the different approaches to just really actively doing things versus sort of letting things unfold. And I really thought I understood it. I really thought I was on team being, if you will, until then late 2019 when I was back in the US and had just got back from a conference in San Diego to Arkansas, where I was a professor of cultural anthropology at the university at the time. And driving home from the airport, I could tell that my back was really tight. And I'm like, okay, when I get up tomorrow, I'm going to have to go to the chiropractor. Woke up the next morning, went to step out of bed, and there was this lightning bolt of agony that shot down my right side. And it couldn't support any weight, and I collapsed. And I had to drag myself literally on my elbows to even cross the room. And we didn't know what it was. The whole thing got mishandled from the word go. Even when my doctor sent me by ambulance to the ER, they never even did x-rays or an MRI, which is what he specifically put on the notes they should.
Right.
They didn't even list what medication they had given me on my discharge
I'm not
paperwork.
a doctor, but I know like a spinal MRI is definitely in order.
And so the whole thing was even misdiagnosed originally as femoral neuropathy. It turned out to actually be nerve damage at the L3 junction on my right side.
Oh my gosh.
And we still don't know what caused it to this day. And it was only more than a month later that we even did the MRI, 2 months later that we got the results, or a month and a half later that we got the results and did a nerve conduction test that proved that there was nerve damage that was still there, a month and a half later. And so I was literally, as you had said, on my back. I was unable to roll onto a side on my own. And if anyone has ever had nerve damage, my complete sympathies. And if anyone hasn't, I wish you never do, because it's not like any other pain, and normal pain meds do nothing for it. The type of medications that help, like gabapentin, can take 6 to 8 weeks to even kick in. And they dull it, but they also leave you groggy. For the doses I needed to be on, I was seeing double. And it was one of those things where there's just this real vulnerability, because no one who was family or like my closest friends lived in the state. And so I just had to reach out to the people who were there and said, look, I need help. If you can even come by for 10 minutes a day, I need my water refilled. I need a protein shake mixed up, and I need a portable urinal emptied. And It's not the type of stuff we like to talk about with people, but I literally couldn't do anything. And so as much as I had thought I'd been on team being before, I literally couldn't do anything. And it really was this existential challenge of, do I have the same value as a human being? Do I have the same value as Jonathan? Am I the same Jonathan? If I'm a different Jonathan, is it one of equal value in any way, shape, or form? And not knowing if I would ever walk again, let alone go back to dancing, which had been a huge part of my life.
Right. Oh my gosh. And it just happened suddenly like that. You were in South America one day, living it up, just being like, wow, I'm having this beautiful experience with these people who just love me for me. They don't care anything about me. And you're just like, wow, this is an amazing trip. And then a day later, you were just, it just happened so suddenly. And I can't even imagine what it must have been like to army crawl across the whole time. You just must be thinking, what is happening?
Yeah. Time-wise, it wasn't literally the next day. I was in Brazil the first half of 2019.
Okay.
And I'd already been back in the States for a couple of months at that point, but going to dance events every other week, and had met someone at one of the events, which is the relationship that you had mentioned.
Right.
And we hit it off. And as happens with a lot of people in the dance community, relationship is long distance, but that's fine because we traveled to events, we saw each other. And sure, when I was at the conference in San Diego, I felt my back tightening up a little. And as I said, driving home from the airport, felt it really tightening up. But I mean, again, no hint it was going to be anything like what it was.
Right.
And even when I went into the doctor's office, it was, again, I was lucky that a friend who had moved away was visiting and staying with me for a couple of days. And so literally, again, dragged myself on my elbows out the front door into the back seat of their car to get to my doctor's office. And that's my doctor then saying, no, we're sending you by ambulance to the ER. You need an x-ray, you need an MRI, which they never did.
Oh my gosh. That is just, I had a significant medical thing happen this year, and just the coordination of care. And then how like doctors will ask, I remember this one doctor kept on asking me questions, and I'm like, I'm a branding and marketing person. Why don't you just look at the notes from the other doctor? Like, I don't speak your language. It's so interesting. So then what was your recovery like? Because obviously you're back at dancing and everything. So you've had like a physical recovery.
Yeah. So it was a long process because, again, originally it was misdiagnosed. And so even though I started with at-home physical therapy, we were treating what was essentially the wrong thing.
And the whole time your spine is vulnerable, right? Like,
I mean, excruciating
you're probably
pain.
just like, oh, just do these big twists. And you're just like, I will,
No, I literally couldn't roll to a side.
Oh my God.
And then because it's nerve activation, every sort of nerve channel on the right side from L3 down in particular is just firing. And so it was so bad that I couldn't even have a sheet on my right leg because the sheet touched the hairs. Each hair went to a follicle, which was a nerve signal. And everything that triggered a nerve signal was just translating as pain. And so it would spasm, which would then be a chain spasm to the next one and the next one.
I feel I had a surgery that resulted in chronic pain. I had complications afterwards. And I am so grateful just to have had that experience so I can relate to people who've had chronic pain, but it's literally the absolute worst. And I had the same thing. I was in the emergency room so many times and I thought, oh God, they're going to think I'm faking it to get pain pills. And I kept on saying, why are you giving me full body narcotics? I have very localized pain. There has to be something we can do to solve this problem. But they didn't. They just kept on giving, and they helped take the edge off. But you go from maybe a 10 to a 7 and you think like, oh, okay, like a 7 is sort of a decent day, and it's still just terrible. And you seem like such a nice, easygoing person too. I can't even imagine that, just experiencing that. And then on top of it, having to ask for help. How well did you know the people you called?
So I actually posted it on my Facebook page and said, look, anyone local to the area, this is the situation. I need help.
And did your angels come?
Well, so that's what was so interesting about it. Because like my dad, who was already retired, offered to fly over. And I said no, because literally I needed 10 minutes of help a day.
Right.
And other than that, he doesn't know his way around. I'm going to feel this pressure. And sometimes the pain was so much like I just needed to yell. I just needed to scream. And if someone's in the other room, I'm going to feel stifled.
Right.
If someone's just over for 10 minutes a day, I can, not do it. But like if someone's living there.
Right.
And so what was so interesting in just sort of saying, look, I don't have any other options right now, and being vulnerable about, the vulnerability. I'll be honest, there were some people who I would have bet would be there in a heartbeat and they never showed up. And that was disappointing. And, at an emotional level, it hurts. But at the same time, there were people who I never would have guessed in 100 years. And yet they were there.
Yeah.
And you never know who's going to actually show up if you don't at least let people know what's going on.
Right. That is so true. I have a person very close to me who was just diagnosed with Parkinson's. So they called me because I had a pretty significant brain thing this summer. And it's so interesting. The one thing I told him was, look, who you think is going to be on your support team is probably not who you think is going to be on your support team. And there are going to be some people, like I had some friends who I would have considered like really, really good friends, but it was clear they only liked fun Heather. And now that I'm back, they're just like, hey, how's it going? And I'm like, wow, where were you guys for the last like 5 or 6 months? Like, it is so interesting. But then the thing is that people do show up and they are there for you, which I think is also so surprising. Like I was in a mastermind and I became like this one woman we just happened to have like we were having a catch up call together. And I just was having a really rough day that day. And she's like, what is wrong? And so I'm like, this is exactly what's happening. And she we barely even knew each other. And she was there for me. Oh my gosh, it was absolutely incredible. Okay, so I got to ask, so you developed this being framework too. So tell me, what does being stand for? And P.S., it is so good, you guys.
Thank you so much. I'd love to, if I could just follow up on what you'd said very briefly. Yes. Mm-hmm. I do want to note that from my own experience, yes, there are the people who are fair weather friends. And if that's where they're at, that's where they're at.
Right.
But also, to be fair, some people are going through things of their own, which we don't know about.
Yes.
And so exactly. I found that out in a couple of situations as well. And so, it's important to also recognize everyone's going through their own stuff at the same time.
Exactly. And some people just don't know what to do. Like, I remember when my mom died, I was like, I'm going to come up with something so much better than how are you doing after someone is grieving. And the only thing I've done is I just have like, how you doing? So then they know I'm talking about like their dead person in their life. I still haven't come up with anything better than that, And so I totally agree. And I don't want people to think that, because that's one of the things is I wasn't mad at anybody. I was just sort of surprised because I don't know. I was just sort of surprised. And,
yeah,
but I thought that's their thing. And it's not mine to fix. It's, nothing that came out wrong. Can we edit this out? Of course, I'm joking. Chris said, we do not need to edit this out. I don't want it to make it seem like anything's broken. But you know what I mean? It's like, if they're having a hard time, I'm not going to confront them and make it harder for them.
Yeah, for sure. So the being strategy that I came up with. So as you had said before, there were a lot of things going on at once. So from my experience in Brazil of really realizing it was about quality of relationships, I'd realized I wanted to pivot away from academia and had realized that life coaching was really the direction I wanted to go in. And some of that was just thinking about, what was it that I was doing as a tenured faculty member?
Right.
And so 40% was research, and I'm good at it. I've written academic books, but I don't love it. And 20% was service, and I'm good at it. I'd been the president of a couple of national organizations, but I don't love it. And 40% was teaching, but it's not the standing in front of a classroom and giving a lecture. It's the informal questions students have about how things apply to their own life in the 5 or 10 minutes before class, or working with my graduate students and really helping them figure out, because I didn't run a lab. It wasn't you're doing a research project that's part of my research. Right. It was helping them figure out what were their questions and how were they going to find their own answers. So helping you figure out your questions and supporting you in figuring out how you're going to find your own answers, that was life coaching. And so I was going through that training at the same time, and that went on hiatus when I was dealing with the spinal injury. And as I was processing everything, it's when I really had to confront that value comes from being. We have innate value just from being who we are. We don't have to prove our value or our worth. Oh, and so that's where I really... Yeah. So, and again, that's part of why I left academia, because it was never going to be within that framework, something where it was about the intrinsic value as opposed to all of these external measures of success.
Right.
And so that's where I really then was, okay, so if being is what matters and I'm trying to figure out my own approach to coaching, what would that mean? And that's where I came up with the being framework. So B is for begin where you are. And I think it's so easy to overlook or jump over that step, because when we know we want something different, when we know we want to make a change, all too often we just jump to change. But if you think about navigating, whether it's on your GPS or your phone, it needs a signal. It needs to know where you are to navigate. If you think about an old-fashioned paper map or the guides in the mall, that pin, you are here, is crucial, because no matter how detailed it is, no matter how accurate it is, it doesn't help if you don't know where you are.
Right. Right. Well, and I think it's also when you're just in life in general, like I work with a lot of female founders who are wanting to start a business, and they're thinking like success seems so far away. And what that does is you want people obviously to have a long game sort of perspective. But at the same time, there are lots of little steps to get there. Like you don't just look at the top of the mountain and just say, I'm going to get up there. And then one day, just all of a sudden, magically, you're up at the top of the mountain. Like there's no way around it. You have to start and climb step by step by step by step by step. And so, but by visualizing like where you want to be and then comparing it. So sometimes I just love this, that you just start with where you are and because it's that momentum. Well, I just think it's that momentum. Like once you start to create that own internal momentum, right? Your own little gyroscope starts spinning and you can start moving. So I love that, being where you are.
Yeah, begin where you are. And again, some of that is figure out what are the things that you have available to you.
Right.
Whether it's different interpersonal connections, whether it's, what are the lessons you've learned in life? What are your personal strengths? And what are the things you can lean into as you navigate versus just trying to follow what worked for someone else? So It's about all of that.
Yeah, because what works for someone, I just know when people in my world, like again, my whole lens is through branding and marketing, but when people do not have a good sense of like who they are, who they help, how they uniquely deliver results. Because I'm always like, you are the only you out there. It is absolutely your best competitive advantage because nobody is you. And so, but when they don't, they'll oftentimes copy somebody else. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, ooh, that's so risky because you forfeit your own voice, but you have no idea why they're doing it, if it's even working, what it's designed to do. Like there's so many variables there too that you just don't know. So it's so much better to start. I love this because I just love anything that is sort of like esoteric in some way, and it still relates to branding and marketing. That makes me so happy. Okay. So
Yeah, no. So exactly as you're saying, if you try and imitate someone else, at best, you'll be a good copy, but you've cut off the possibility of everything that might emerge.
Right.
That's your own zone of genius.
Exactly.
So E is explore where you want to go.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
And I think that's so important because again, if you're trying to get away from a given location, it's so easy to say, I just want to get away. I want to go on vacation. Okay, great. But do you want the mountains? Do you want to go skiing? Do you want a beach? Do you want museums and theater? There are so many possibilities.
Right.
And so in everyday life, you see people who are just chasing a promotion, which again, there's nothing wrong with getting a promotion, but what's actually involved? And so when you dig down and why, oftentimes it's, well, okay, better pay so then I can take my family on vacation and to better places. And that matters because time with them is the most important thing.
Right.
Well, okay. With that promotion, do you actually have more time or less time with them?
Right. Right.
And so again, it's not right or wrong, but really explore where you want to go and, what's right for you.
Right. Well, one of the things I'm sort of seeing a theme emerge too, that we've only gotten to the B and the E, right? But that my kids are in their 20s. And I often wonder, like, who raised them, me or society? And it's both completely and totally. Because I just remember when my son, one of our dogs died when he was a freshman in high school. And he was upset. And I could tell he was going to start to cry. But somehow, not his mom, society told him boys don't cry. And I could see like the conflict on his face. Like, because if he was in 8th grade, that probably would have been just fine. So I'm always cry, let it out. But there's so much to get that promotion. There's status, there's title, there's more money. I totally get that because I used to be like such a corporate girl. I was always just like, oh God, talk about proving. Did I have something to prove? I had no idea. And just all that energy that goes into, and then the taking on of so many things to prove when no one's asking me to prove anything, by the way. It's just, that's how people burn out. I feel like you're just taking on so much, like how you were saying, yeah, you get that promotion to spend more time, so you can do these things with your family, but in reality, it's a good, now your job is like, we're putting those golden handcuffs on you, a little bit to some extent.
Absolutely. And it was chasing those external things about the next publication and, next, whatever it was, like
Right.
those were the things that were that for me. And it was not what was meaningful or fulfilling to me, but just the things I'd internalized within an academic framework of what you're supposed to do.
The culture of academia seems almost so militant too. Like you're chasing tenure. And then when you get tenure, that's like just the absolute Mac Daddy of everything. And so I can see where that's like what you just, when you decided to be, those are the rules of that game.
Yep.
Okay. So what does I stand for?
I is for identify your options, because once you know where you are and where you're starting and where you want to go, there is no one way to go between them. So identify all of the options. And then the other sort of parallel phase of that is once you've identified all your options, identify how you've made your best choices. So looking back on your own life and major pivot points, which are the directions or, selections you've made that looking back, you're like, yeah, that was a great one. And that worked out the way I hoped or even better. And what are the things which really didn't pan out? And there's not a right or wrong, but it's for you. And once you've done that, think about how you came to each decision. So is it when you're, doing a pro and con list? Is it when you're just listening to your gut? Is it when you bring it to close friends and family who know you well? How have you made the decisions that have worked out the best for you? Once you've identified that, apply it to all the options to move between where you are and where you want to go to choose which is really the best way for you.
I love that. I actually read this really amazing book called 10X is Easier Than 2X. Have you ever read it by Dan Martell?
I haven't read it, but I'm familiar.
Okay. So one of the things he suggests is you have 10X. So if you're making $100,000 a year, think about a time when you were making $10,000. Maybe you were 16 working part-time. And from age 16 to the time you were making $100,000, go through like all the different decisions you made in your life. I just love that exercise because it helps to give you context. And it also shows us we have 10X'd our lives probably multiple times and that we don't even take the time to really explore that. I love that. I just think it's so helpful to reflect too on the decisions that worked. Because I know failure is helpful, but I learned a lot more from what works. I'm almost like our society has such a love affair with failure. They're just like, oh my God, we all love a good rags to riches story, or someone has just crashed and burned and then they rise from the ashes like a phoenix. But I learned so much more from things that work, versus I can tell. Yeah. Well, tell me what you think. I can tell your face. You're just like, huh?
Yeah. Well, no. So I think it's more on the side of, I don't know that I would actually think of something as a failure, right? It's something may not have panned out the way I wanted. That doesn't make it a failure. Right. That said, what was it that wasn't fulfilling to me? What was it that didn't work out the way I wanted? And I can learn from that.
Yes.
And so it's more on that side that I think of it. At least for me, I try and frame it a little differently. But I do agree that there is this, it's sort of funny. It goes in two directions. There is this love affair with a, sort of deficits model. So think about in work settings, feedback. It's usually around like, what aren't you doing well? What do you need to do the way someone else is doing it, as opposed to leveraging what do you do well and how can we maximize that?
Exactly. Like I remember when the Strengths Finder came out, I was like, yes, this is because I used to, I was like a creative, and for a long part of my career, I managed corporate and investor communications. And I just remember people trying to get me into finance and accounting. And I'm like, why would I do that? Like I have a whole team of numbers people who this is what they do. They just give me the numbers. I'm just writing the narrative and the story. But I remember like having a boss that was, you need to, because they wanted me to, I guess I had no desire to go into investor relations, but they thought that was what I wanted until they asked me. Mm-hmm. And then I was like, no, God, no, I don't want to do that at all.
The way I think about it is like, take an elite athlete, someone who's an elite athlete. Yes, they're elite and they'll be, better than the average person at anything they do that's athletic. But you don't take someone who's, say a world-class swimmer and say, oh, but when we put you on a track, you're really bad. It's a deficit. Let's spend the majority of your training time on the track.
Right.
You don't do it. If there's something that's, functional cross training, sure, but you maximize what someone's good at and let them do that. And
Right.
Good leadership is about supporting people and putting people in the right place to excel, not trying to force them into the model of being someone who they're not.
Right. Oh my gosh. So complete. Okay. So N might be my favorite letter in the whole shebang.
Yep. And now start.
Yes.
Because all too often,
Yes. I just got like goosebumps. I'm like, yes.
Yeah. All too often it's whether it's, paralysis by analysis, whether it's perfectionism, trying to account for everything, get the plan perfectly right. Like we never actually take that crucial step forward. And the thing that I think is so important here is if you really think about that, where you are, you've done the begin where you are, you've explored where you're going to go. Mm-hmm. So you know where you're trying to get to. You've identified your options, so you know how you're getting between the two and right. Why you chose that. Then you're never lost. So sure, there may be detours. It's real life. Things happen. But if I'm driving home and there's road construction in a detour, it may be frustrating, but I'm not lost. I still get home.
Right.
And if I'm driving home and I realize I'm tired, I really don't want to stop and pick up groceries, but if I do it now, it's only 10 minutes out of the way. And if I have to make a separate trip tomorrow, it's 35 minutes and I'd rather suck it up and do it now. Again, it's inconvenient. It's not the most pleasant. It's a detour that's voluntary, but I'm not lost. Right. And so if you've really done the B, the E, and the I, there's nothing to stop you from starting because again, things will happen. There'll be detours, but you're never lost. You just need to go around them because you know why you've chosen to go the way you are.
Oh my gosh. Yes, this is so true. This is because in my world, when it comes to marketing, a lot of people are like, oh, I got to do marketing. I'm going to sit down and do that right now. And then they're just like, well, they think it's like, oh, I got to write something. And so I got to do some social media. And I'm like, that is not how things work in the marketing real world. We really have a plan and then we follow that plan. And of course, to your point, there are sometimes curveballs or things that happen that you're not anticipating, but when you know your options, you just know, you just always have your plan B and plan C and plan D. Like it's so surprising to me when people, and I just think plans and process like that gets such a bad rap because, and I just think about your GPS analogy. Like I've lived in Denver since 1999. I still always use this thing and pull up a map to make sure tomorrow I have a meeting at a part of town that I'm sort of familiar with, but I never think about going anywhere. I'm not like, you know what? I'm just going to figure it out on my own. I just think I'm like, no, I have this amazing tool that I can use. We have this amazing tool that we can use as well. So I love that. And then the starting creates that momentum, creates that context, creates the experience. I think like the Stoics say, don't focus on the results. Focus on results, not like the future, which I think is because what you need to do right now, do it to the very best of your ability. Then you get to the big payoff, right?
Yes. And at the same time, I would also stress the opposite. Anything that's worth doing, and this comes from Dory Clark, is worth doing poorly. So all too often we hear if it's worth doing, it's worth doing well. But if it's worth brushing your teeth, it's better to do 30 seconds than not at all if you don't have 2 minutes. If it's worth eating healthy, sure, maybe it can't be a perfect diet, but cut out one unhealthy thing. If you can't go to the gym, but can walk for 10 minutes, if it's worth doing, it's worth doing at all. So even if you can only do a little, if it's in the direction of that you want to go, do it.
Right. Okay.
Just start.
I love that. Yes. You're like, now just go start. Small step. Doesn't have to be, it just has to be a step without any judgment, good or bad. Maybe that's what I'm doing is I'm applying a judgment to it. This is a good step forward. This is a bad step forward. And that can really sort of get you sort of caught up and just not even taking a step then.
Yeah, because that's the thing. Is it a step forward or not? Period.
Right. That's interesting because when people are like, "Oh, I'm so far behind," or "I'm just making baby steps," I'm like, I don't care if you're making literally moving a millimeter a day, as long as you're moving forward. Amazing. But we do, that is so interesting. Okay. So the G then sums it, just wraps it all up.
Yeah. G is get your best life. And it doesn't mean that it's a finished position that, you've arrived and you're at a plateau and it's over. But what it does mean is it's really important to take stock and recognize all of the progress you've made and all of the things you've learned, developed, all the growth from when you were just beginning where you were. And so really consolidating all of that movement, shift, growth, development. In some ways, you could say G is almost parallel to gratitude in that way. And recognizing that you now have a process under your belt that you can reapply at any time. Your toolkit is so much bigger now.
Yeah. So tell me about how would somebody just apply that in their normal, like if someone's like, okay, that sounds good, but tell me, how can someone do a quick flashcard version of that? Is it something that you can just do in your head? Or is it something better to have pen and paper and journaling? But where's the starting point for that? Someone's feeling overwhelmed, or how are they feeling? They're just, I'm caught up in all the doing, all the external things. I know that this is important. So how do I do that?
Sure. So I think the being is really a big picture strategic thing. And so you do want to have the time and the space to really reflect on each step. Mm-hmm. That said, I think you're raising a really important point, which is in the moment, life can come at us really fast and hard. Again, exactly as you said before, like I was dealing with the whole trifecta of things, right? I had the spinal injury. I was just starting to teach. I was very lucky that the chair of my department made arrangements so that I could teach online. In theory, why we didn't suggest taking sick leave and just bowing out, I don't know. And so for like an hour a day, I would prop my laptop on my chest, flat on my back, try and, respond to student things. And the end of the semester, in the evals, I had one student who clearly was not paying attention to the messages I was writing. They're like, why should I take this class seriously if the professor can't be bothered to show up? I couldn't move.
Right. Yeah.
Right in January of 2020, it caught me by surprise. And again, it was a long distance relationship. The woman involved, amazing woman. And really it had been the most, healthy growth. I don't even know what I'd say, fertile, nourishing relationship of my life.
Right.
But it came to an end. And again, long distance by phone, caught me by surprise that she broke up with me. And not her fault that it caught me by surprise. It was sort of several different things going on. She was actually trying to be considerate of some academic deadlines, and so had been putting it off.
Oh, gosh. Okay.
And so the reason I'm bringing this up is because this is where I came up with this. I didn't have a term for it yet, but whether it's competing pressures and commitments and responsibilities, or whether it's overwhelming emotion, I think there is a tactical piece which we can do in the moment.
Right.
Because I remember being on the phone with her, sitting in the recliner, which we had moved to the foot of my bed, so I could at least try and sit up vertically for, a half an hour a day at that point. And there are these tears streaming down my face. And, we're at a point in the conversation and she's like, do you just want to hang up for now and maybe we can touch base in, a week or whatever. I said, no, give me a minute. And I remember the thought going through my head, I'm never going to have this moment to do over. And there are all of these experiences that I've had in life and everyone I've ever spoken to does, where whether it's 2 hours, 2 weeks, 2 months, even 2 years later, it's like, dang it, I wish I had said, or I wish I had done.
Right.
And so I had this, I don't know where it came from. I now call it future casting, but it was looking back on this, what am I going to have wanted to have said?
Right.
And I don't know where it came from at the time. I guess unconsciously, it was just a distillation of my life experience and awareness. And so I said, give me a minute. And I was finally able to just, again, tears streaming down my face, but say to this amazing woman, I really want to thank you for this amazing relationship and all of the growth and learning involved. But more than anything else, I want to thank you for being you.
Oh my gosh.
And so to this day, I have no regrets about how that concluded. And again, later on, I came up with the terminology of future casting. But so it's by focusing on the how. So whether it's a business meeting, an interview, an interaction with a boss, a peer, a family member, how do I want to be? Is the in the moment thing that you don't need any pen and paper. You don't need the time to do the strategy. How do I want to be right here and now?
Right. I love that. Did you feel yourself, because you said that you were crying, and did you feel yourself feeling the whole of that emotion and then sort of self-soothing to this place? Because she sounds like she was also being very compassionate towards you too. Like it was probably the nicest, like she seemed so considerate,
Oh, yeah.
And for you to deliver something that's so legit, full of gratitude, and so much love for, even if it's so real, so did you feel like that just seems so healthy? That's what I'm trying to say, is it just feels so healthy to go from this state of, because I think a lot of times when people act out against someone in anger, which you could, to say like, oh my God, because I think it's honestly because they're hurt and they're just trying to avoid more hurt. I think that's a fundamental fear or a fundamental emotion that sort of causes that. And it's so awful to feel that way.
Sure. It hurts. Of course it does. And I mean, as you said, no, she is an incredible woman. We probably message each other twice a year, just something small that we see on social media, the other person posted, but really a remarkable human being. But one of the things that I learned during that relationship and I've taken forward is the real mistake that can be made in ever prioritizing the relationship, because it's an abstract. The relationship is a mental model of the way we think things should be or are supposed to be.
Right.
And as one of my, mentors in the coaching space pointed out, any should is fighting with what is. And so if instead of trying to prioritize,
any should, I got to write that down.
Yep. Any should is fighting with what is.
I love that.
So here, I'll do a quick tangent on that. My boss should have recognized my efforts. My coworkers should have done their fair share. My kids should have listened to me. The service here should have been better. I should have gone to the gym. Well, did those things happen or not? And so one of the things that I really encourage people to do, try to take a piece of paper, put a line down the middle, and just, if you can in the moment, and if not, thinking back on it later in the day, on one side of the paper, anytime it's a should about yourself, and anytime on the other side, it's a should about anything external. Don't do anything with it. Just record it. Then, before you go to bed at night, cross out should and rewrite it with could. My boss could have recognized my effort. My coworker could have done their fair share. My kid could have listened to me. I could have gone to the gym. And if you do that for a week or two, you'll both start to realize what are the topics or the clusters around which you have these internalized ideas of what the world's supposed to be like and where you're fighting with it the most. And you'll start to recognize it in the moment when you do it and be able to replace should with could. Because once you say could, well, did it happen or didn't it? Now I'm empowered. If it didn't happen, what do I want to do now?
Right.
How do I want to respond now?
I think the word should holds us into that external, right? Like whatever we believe externally is the right thing to do. Where could, I just know neurologically, there are just certain words that literally unlock your brain for possibility. Could is one, curious is another one. Like, I'm really curious to see what I love, because, I work with a lot of online entrepreneurs. So there's a lot of like, oh, I'm struggling with this, or my challenge is this. And I'm like, wow, those words, if you just change it to like, wow, I'm so curious. How can I do marketing and also hold down my full-time job? Like, it just opens your brain up to possibility, And so I call that throwing the line out. You throw the line out, you know what it feels like when you have some lines in the water. You're just waiting for the universe or inspiration or whatever to strike on the other side. And I think that is just absolute. I love that reframing from should to could. Mm-hmm. And then I think what I like most about it is this opportunity to then identify what are those things that are just really, really getting me. And then being able, that's such a beautiful way to go from external into internal in a really, I think, that's sort of like sneaking vegetables in to eat the kids, sneaking I got my kids to eat veggies. But I love that. That's such a simple reframe that I think is pretty objective.
Yeah. And so exactly as you're saying, anytime it's this mental model of things should be a certain way, then you're really only allowing one possibility.
Right.
And it means if anything doesn't match that, everything except that one possibility is now a quote failure. Whereas if you say it could be this way, well, but what else could be? And that's where you could then apply your curiosity. And if many things could be possible, then you've actually opened up that there are many possible successes. It's not there's only one possible success.
Oh my God, that's almost like borderline quantum physics. That's like amazing. Oh my gosh, absolutely mind-blowing. Jonathan, how can people get in touch with you? Do you want to share anything with my audience? Tell me, I just think, how can people get in touch with you? How can people follow you? How can people become more being and doing, being then doing? How can people learn more about the framework? You tell me everything.
Yep. So it's funny that you were referencing little steps before, because my business name is Steps Along the Way. Because I think both how we each end up as ourselves in this moment is all the steps we've taken to get here.
Yep.
But how we live our best life is being really intentional and deliberate about what our next steps are. So my website is stepsalongtheway.global. Again, part of that is I am a nomad. I do travel all the time. Totally, but it's also my cultural anthropology background that I really do enjoy working with people from all different walks of life backgrounds.
Right.
So stepsalongtheway.global. And if anyone is interested in just getting a little bit of support in exploring what's your next step, then not even a consultation, but just a what's your next step chat, just get on www.stepstochat.com, schedule a completely complimentary 30-minute chat about your next steps. And then if after that you want to explore working together, we can set up a consultation. But if not, that's okay.
That sounds absolutely amazing. It has been absolutely such a pleasure. And I love that we're meeting on a Monday. Like, this is my first meeting of the day today, because I just know my whole week, but really my whole life is going to be different knowing this. One of the things I've been really keen on is not like, what do I want to have happen, but who do I need to be to have all those things? And I realized like that's sort of like one of those little aha moments. And this is a really, I just feel this is so straightforward to be able to really map that out. Because when you're trying to think, who do I want to be? That's such a huge, isn't that the question? Who am I? What am I doing here? What are we all doing here? So I love how simple this framework is. I'm for sure going to be doing the being framework, right? I have a huge notepad, blank piece right here. I am ready to rock and roll with that. Jonathan, thank you so much. It has been such a pleasure.
Absolutely my pleasure. Thank you so much, Heather.
Oh, awesome.